Dolphins fans are understandably frustrated after Teddy Bridgewater was ruled out of Sunday's game after this hit, despite not showing anything that we clearly saw suggestive of this ataxia. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and if you've learned something from my channel before but aren't subscribed, please consider doing so. Turns out only about a quarter of people who watch these videos are, and that really does help with channel growth. I've been very critical of the NFL's concussion protocol after what happened with Tua, and so I think it's only fair to address the other side of things based on what we saw with Teddy Bridgewater this past weekend. The updates to the concussion protocol centered around this idea of gross motor instability, and they basically changed it from gross motor instability to this description of something called ataxia, which is the same sort of thing, loss of balance, impaired coordination, or trouble with your speech, but makes it more from a neurologic process. They completely removed the orthopedic qualifier, and so I think overall this was an improvement. What the NFL is clearly trying to capture with this language is things like what we saw with Nyheim Hines on the Thursday night game. These clear examples of stumbling, impaired balance, impaired coordination after a moment where somebody could have had a head injury. But we have to understand that in a situation as severe as what happened with Tua, whenever you implement a change, there's going to be a swing of that pendulum that's probably going to overshoot the target, at least initially, until we go through this learning period. And sure enough, what team does this affect first but the Miami Dolphins? We saw this hit here on Teddy Bridgewater, and of course there was contact to his elbow, which I think explains a lot of what he was doing looking at his arm with this elbow injury. No clear contact to the head. As he goes down, certainly this fall, his head hits the turf, there's some whiplash. This certainly could exert enough force to cause a concussion, but not every time, and so that's why we have these other things in the protocol. On the replay Sunday, we certainly didn't see any evidence of this gross motor instability, or now termed ataxia, and a TV station shared some additional footage that really, again, didn't show anything, at least from this clip, that was concerning. We see Bridgewater on the ground here. There's no real head shaking. He didn't have any posturing or any of those impact seizures like the fencing response. Gets up off the field and seems to be reacting totally normal after a quarterback who's taken a hard hit. Again, coming off the field, no real head shaking, certainly doesn't seem to be stumbling or having any signs of ataxia. And so understandably now Dolphins fans are frustrated about this, right? They lost their quarterback for this game because of how this was observed by one of the spotters, and now Bridgewater's in the protocol and can't even really do football activities till potentially Thursday. In complete fairness to people who were there at the game, there might have been something they saw that was outside of this clip. So it's not entirely fair to be critical of them when all we have is this moment in time. Typically, if somebody's going to stumble or have ataxia, it'll be during that period that we witnessed, but there might have been something on the sidelines that we simply don't have footage of that would make this call more reasonable. There's been a lot of attention brought up now about these ATC spotters, because that's presumably what happened here. One of the spotters up in the booth or up in the stands saw something they were concerned of, phoned down to the team, and per the protocol, Bridgewater was ruled out. These spotters, the ATC, stands for a Certified Athletic Trainer, and this is not just like some go to a weekend course and get a certification. This is like a post-undergraduate graduate program that requires extensive training, extensive experience on the field covering sports. And so these people honestly probably have more exposure and experience to concussions than physicians do, because they're at practice, they're on the sidelines, they know the athletes most of the time better than the team doctors do. And so honestly, they're probably better equipped to understand some of the nuances of what they're observing, because they're there day in, day out, more than those physicians. The physician is probably going to be better at the actual exam, the actual evaluation, but in terms of just being aware of the players, the team, their personalities, observing differences, these ATC spotters are going to be pretty good. Now, this depends, of course, on if they're affiliated with the team or if they're just independent certified athletic trainers that came in for the weekend. But still, these people have training. These people have credentials to back it up. I don't know what they saw in this case. Like I said, it's possible there was something else that we didn't witness with the video that was captured. And this is honestly something that's kind of expected after the big shift that happened with Tua. We're going to go through this period of probably overshooting on some of these calls, because when it's something as serious as a concussion, we're all taught in medicine, when in doubt, sit them out. If you're ever on the fence about something being a concussion, yes or no, we're always going to default to it being a concussion, because the stakes are just too high if we're wrong and we put somebody back in and then they get another concussion and suffer something like second impact syndrome. I think everybody would agree we want the game to be safer, and it's not going to be perfect in the first weekend back after a change, especially when it's the same team who this directly impacted in the weeks before. I totally understand fans saying that this is just as bad of a look as Tua's initial injury being missed was at the moment, because now we're still sort of getting this mixed message of like, well, can one person really just take a player out of the game because of something they saw when nobody else can back it up? And so it's going to be a bit of a growing period here for everybody to get accustomed to the new criteria. There's probably going to be some additional training implemented for these spotters, for everybody in the sideline in terms of reviewing video footage, understanding what I think should be clear-cut examples of ataxia, like what we saw with Tua, what we saw with Daniel Jones a couple of years ago, what we saw with Nyheim Hines, those clear, gross examples of stumbling rather than these little subtle things. Those little subtle instances is when you need to do the exam. It's when you need to do the rest of the evaluation. Those no-go criteria are really meant for the big, obvious, in your face, there it was, we saw it, it was easily apparent, as opposed to these ones where it's a little bit more nuanced, and I think that's probably what happened here with Bridgewater. And again, I think it's totally fair and understandable based on these being new criteria for the first week and how recent all of this was with what just happened. Be patient with the league, understand that everybody's hopefully trying to work towards player safety here. I think we'll get there eventually, it'll be improved, but there's probably going to be more of these little road bumps along the way where, again, if we're unsure, we're always going to err on the side of the head injury, and that's just what fans need to expect until things become better. Let me know as always any questions or comments down below, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.